And now that brings us to our closing speaker for our two-day IDC Worldsource launch. And for those who attended our VP conferences in the past year, you would have seen Amy as our keynote speaker at the two events, one in Banff, Alberta for the West, and then of course one in Collingwood, the VP conference for Eastern Canada. And what's really interesting, Amy comes from an insurance-based family, and for those longtime Canada lifers on the call today, her grandfather is Fraser Deacon, and who was a legend in the life insurance business back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it was interesting, I came across his name in an old Canada Life magazine just before the holiday season, and he was a leader, and I think I scanned it and sent it to Amy. And but the Deacon family is very well known to Canada Life. So Amy is a clinical social worker and founder of Toronto Wellness Counseling. Beyond running this full service therapy clinic, Amy is committed to supporting both individuals and organizations achieve mental and emotional wellness. Amy is committed to helping people live their most empowered, healthy lives. And speaking to us today about harmony in the digital age, navigating the rise of technology and AI with a focus on human relationships. Amy, it's all yours.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And from what I gather, this is the last conversation of the day, I think. So let's end on a high note as we discuss harmony in the digital age and navigating the rise of AI with a focus on human relationships. So it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago that totally coincidentally, I found myself as a therapist actually working with a couple of individuals who at the time were developing some of the AI technologies that we use today. And I remember being in session and learning about all that AI could do. And I remember just thinking, Amy, I really, really hope that this flood of internal dread that you are experiencing is not coming through your facial expressions. As I was hearing all that AI could do, was going to do, I think I just had an image of the Terminator and robots taking over the entire world and, peace out. It was a really, really dire, which I actually don't think is that uncommon a reaction. So at the time, I sort of committed myself where I wanted to follow the research and the evolution of AI, but with a particular focus. I wanted to, I guess, partly because of selfish reasons, what I really wanted to know is, can AI replace human relationships? So the selfish part is that I just wanted to know if I was still going to have a job. Is it going to be able to take over being a therapist? And I don't know how to develop new skills. And so that was the selfish part. The not so selfish part, though, is that we know that human relationships and the quality of our relationships is one of the largest determining factors of the quality of our lives. And so again, I was really, really curious, could AI take over this arena? So this isn't a spoiler because it's exactly what we're going to talk about. But the long and the short of it, the answer is no. No. AI at present does not have the capacity to duplicate or to replicate relationships, connection, community. And so again, when I was in that therapy session, just getting those images of dread, being facetious and in hindsight, recognizing that that's not exactly what it is at all. But you recognize that AI is going to be able to do a ton, take over tasks, procedures, protocols, whatever it may be. But this arena of human relationships, this arena of community, whether it's personal, whether it's professional, it's still ours. And so whether you think of it as an opportunity, I might push more towards it's an obligation. We want to get good at this one thing, one of the few things that we know AI can't compete with us on, which is human relationships. Great quote by Amit Ray. And Amit is a really interesting character. He's an advocate of compassionate AI, which is a whole topic in and of itself. But I love this statement. As more and more artificial intelligence is entering into the world, more and more emotional intelligence must enter into leadership. And I almost, in my mind, what kind of comes to mind, the image is a teeter-totter, right? Again, just what I previously said, we know that AI is going to be able to be so effective, so efficient with those tasks, procedures, whatever it may be. But we as human beings want to balance the artificial intelligence with the human intelligence, with the emotional intelligence, right? Because we want to ensure, to the best of our abilities, that AI is being applied in a way that is more helpful than it is harmful, right? So again, AI is going to take off in terms of the intelligence and all that it's capable of doing, but we as human beings have a responsibility to ensure that it's being done in a way that is emotionally intelligent. Now, the latter part of this statement, more and more emotional intelligence must enter into leadership. I think sometimes when we think about leadership, we think about the AI CEOs and these big tech giants. And of course, we really do hope that they have some semblance of emotional intelligence. But I think that at some point, all of us are leaders, right? Whether it's in our department, at work, in our homes, in our community. And I think that we don't want to waste our time pointing to leaders to get it together and for them to embody emotional intelligence. Instead, we want to use that energy to cultivate it within ourselves. So a bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. I want to just briefly touch on the psychology of change, because every once in a while, as a collective, there's a societal change that we go through, and our survival mechanisms come out, and we're going to see some just at times not jarring reactions, but intense reactions. And I want to talk about why that is and what we can do to help. We're going to discuss why relationships reign supreme, as well as why AI cannot, to date, replicate relationships. And then we're talking about emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is the main ingredient when it comes to building healthy, sustainable relationships. So we're going to do a little bit of an inventory, but don't worry, it's private. Nobody has to unmute themselves and let everybody know what your strengths and weaknesses are. And then we're going to talk about 5 strategies in particular to strengthen emotional intelligence. I've got some reading recommendations at the end, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them after the bulk of this, rather. Okay, the psychology of change, friends. We don't love change. We as human beings, we are hardwired to prefer stability and consistency and predictability. It makes us feel safe. It gives us the illusion that we're in control, even though we know that's not always the case. And it's interesting because we know that we're always changing, we're always evolving, but every once in a while, we go through a major social change. And the last example that I can think of is probably Y2K. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I remember the fear of what was going to happen to the power grids, what were going to happen to the airplanes, to the electricity, when the clock struck midnight and we went from 1999 to 2000. We saw people's very, very primal reactions. People were hoarding on groceries and toiletries because they were scared. We were working with something that we didn't fully understand what it was going to look like. And I think that it's probably smart to expect the same with AI, although I'm getting the sense that with AI, it might be a little bit more gradual. And so we know that when we're going through these sudden changes, big transitions, that little part of our brain called the amygdala that's responsible for our survival, looks at threats and just wants to claw at it. It goes off and it says code red. I don't know what this is, what's happening. And we are at risk of going into fight, flight, or freeze. Sometimes I think that when we think about fight, flight, or freeze, I think the image that we come to mind is perhaps our ancestors fighting off some saber-toothed tiger. We like to think of ourselves as intellectuals and we're polished and we've evolved. No. And let me give you an example. So there have been times where a company is making a major change in their business. So perhaps they've been acquired or they've suddenly got a new CEO, there's been layoffs, there's been a change of management, whatever it may be. And so I'll go into the company to help support staff afterwards, after the town hall or whatever it may be. So I'll be sitting in the back of this town hall and I'm surrounded by intellectuals and professionals And I can, from a distance, see who is in fight, who is in flight, and who is in freeze. My fighters are the ones who are going toe to toe with the new CEO or HR, demanding transparency. How did this happen? They are fighting with the change. The people who are in flight are the ones, they suddenly got an email and it's urgent. I've got to go. Sorry, can't attend this town hall, or I'm really busy with work. Just let me know how it goes. Or I'm suddenly not feeling well. I'm out. They're so overwhelmed with the stress in the moment that they just want to flee. And then my people who go through freeze, they're just staying like stuck in the moment. They don't want to move a muscle because they don't want to be next on the chopping block or whatever it may be. So these reactions are still very real in us, and it's evident in the data, right? We've got 46% of Canadians who perceive AI as a threat. We've got 48% who believe AI will negatively impact them personally. So this is when they're thinking about, fraud or deep fakes, or perhaps I'm not going to have a job anymore. 57% who fear that AI will replace human beings. So clearly a lot of fear. And we know from oodles and oodles of research that one of the best ways for us as human beings to go through times of that change and that transition is with the presence of other human beings, is through good relationships, right? Where we are able to talk about our fears and explore possible solutions. It helps to regulate our stress. It helps to regulate our mood. And I know, not to get too brain heavy, but it helps to really engage our executive functioning skills. So our executive functioning skills are responsible for logic, reason, rationale. Let me give you an example just to illustrate. So if I ask an average person just a blanket statement of how do you feel about AI, I'll probably get an answer that's rooted in fear, right? I'll get one of those fight, flight, or freeze responses. However, through conversation, through human dialogue, if I'm able to get a little bit more nuanced, and I say something along the lines of, there's a ton of research that's suggesting that certain AI technologies can detect cancers much sooner than the human eye. In particular, say a colon cancer can detect it much sooner, which is one of the fastest spreading cancers. So you're able to get treatment much sooner. If you were going for a cancer screening, would you want AI technologies involved? Most people will say yes, right? Because again, you're helping to calm down that amygdala in relationship with another person and encouraging that we use logic and rationale and reason as we maneuver through this, and we maneuver through it together. And this is why relationships reign supreme. In the West in particular, we can get so hyper individualistic and hyper independent and rely only on ourselves. And we can really minimize and diminish what social and emotional creatures we are. Because an artificial intelligence, it's exactly as it's described, it's artificial. And we sense it, we feel it. We even think about the research that exists about social media connections, right? Whether you're connecting with a colleague on LinkedIn or a family member on Facebook, I don't know, somebody on whatever other platform, Instagram, even though we know you're speaking with another person, it's not the same connection. We're more likely to log off feeling lonely and anxious and depressed. And so even the parasocial relationships that we have don't quite cut it for us, let alone artificial ones. And so much of the way that we bond, so much of the way that we communicate, that we strengthen relationships is not even through words. It's nonverbal. It's our eye contact. It's the tone of our voice. It's our mannerisms. It's the way we tell our stories, the way we tell our jokes. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but behind our faces, well, in our faces, however you want to describe it, we have what are called mirror neurons. And it's almost as though, again, it's evidence that we're so hardwired to live life in community, live life with good friendships, good relationships. So these mirror neurons, if I'm sitting with somebody and they tell me that recently somebody close to them passed away, without me even knowing it, my face will start to contort to mirror their sadness and their pain and to express sympathy. Like my eyes will shift so that they know, I know they're in pain. And on the flip side, just the other day, I ran into an old neighbor at the grocery store, And growing up, her son really, really struggled. And she gave me an update that he's in the armed forces. He's made these amazing group of friends. He's thriving, so healthy, so well. She's lighting up in the grocery store, so excited. I'm lighting up in the grocery store. It's not my child, but it's because we're in that moment together. And we as human beings don't even fully understand how all of this even works, let alone to put it into an algorithm that AI can replicate. The other thing that I think we sometimes forget is that we're storytellers. Whether you look back at our history and just oral tradition that was passed on for centuries, but even our day to day, we go into the office, how was your commute? And we tell a story. You finish a big business meeting, how did the meeting go? We tell a story. We come home from the end of the day, how was your day? How was work? We tell a story. We are always telling stories. We love that blending of narratives. AI doesn't have any original stories, and it's such a silly example, but I don't know if you've ever been told this really outrageous story only to find out it was a lie. And you just feel icky because it's not genuine, and we crave that. We crave that as human beings. We crave real, genuine stories, real, genuine people. And it's very, very interesting that the storytelling, the emotion, the social, it's also riddled throughout the research. So something as simple as, if I'm going to buy tickets online, I'm fine for a chatbot to direct me. That's totally okay. However, if I'm somebody and my internet shut down on me for 3 or 4 days, and I'm frustrated, I do not want to speak to a chatbot. I want to speak to a human being, because I want them to hear my story. I want them to hear how frustrating it was, or how much business it cost me, or whatever it may be. I want another human being who's going to be able to understand and appreciate my frustration. Another example, art. AI is able to create unspeakably beautiful art. Just drop dead gorgeous. I don't know if that's how we exactly should be describing art, but nevertheless, once people realize that a person didn't make it, there was no struggle, there's no story, there's no emotion, no thank you. No thank you. No, because again, that's what we're drawn to. Last example that I'll give, specific to the workplace. So another great research emerged where they're using AI in HR and management roles, and seeing what works, what doesn't. So they find that people are good with AI technologies in the workplace if it's a matter of giving kind of just straightforward feedback. Your sales are great, your emails are up, you're timely, organized, whatever it may be. Very basic back and forth that can sometimes actually be tedious for employees and employers. However, when employees want a new job, or they want a promotion, or they want a raise, they don't want the algorithm. They want the person, because they want to be able to make their case. They want to be able to tell their story. And so this is our arena. This is our arena that we want to increasingly own. So why AI cannot replicate relationships. And this was the part that maybe has struck me the most. And not to get dark, but for what it's worth, they've tried, and they're still trying, to create AI best friends and AI girlfriends and boyfriends. And much like you would imagine, it's really weird, and it's very disingenuous, and people don't have positive reviews, because capturing all of the human messiness and complexities is no small challenge. So I think we know this, but it's worth just reminding us. AI is not sentient. AI has no lived experience. AI has no original thoughts or feelings, or it doesn't. And the part that jumped out to me the most, the part that's kind of stuck with me the most, is this. AI can't relate to us because AI doesn't know pain and suffering. It doesn't know struggle. It doesn't know challenge. It doesn't know how to demonstrate compassion when somebody's parent has passed away, because it doesn't know loss. It doesn't know how to be empathetic when somebody loses their job because it doesn't know the stress of trying to figure out, how am I going to still pay for my family? It doesn't know the messiness of fighting, doesn't know the rage and the intensity of anger. It cannot relate. It doesn't know trust, right? It doesn't know intuition, gut intuition, right? If I'm walking in a rough part anywhere in Canada and somebody's walking towards me and I suspect there's perhaps a bit of drugs, there's a mental health involved, I'm not going to go and ask ChatGPT, do I cross this street? I'm going to listen to my gut and my intuition, and I'm going to make a beeline for it. It doesn't know that. And the human experience, what we sometimes forget is that we only know joy because we know sorrow. We only know gratitude because we know grief. We only know like that sense of peace because we know the struggle, because we know suffering, because we know loss. Again, for me as a mental health therapist, where the majority of my job is to help people navigate pain, I know very well. I go into many sessions where clients are like, I'm done. I don't want any of this. I don't want the pain. I don't want the struggle. I'm done learning my lessons. I'm wise. Let me just move on. But it's that exact thing. It's the fact that we know that pain and that suffering and that struggling, that AI can't duplicate us. Interesting. So if this is our arena that we still own, at present, it is ours. We want to get good with emotional intelligence. We want to get good with how we show up in relationships. So again, I'm not going to unmute anybody. This is all for you and to take inventory of yourselves. Are you aware? Are you mindful of your own predispositions? So what are predispositions? Your predispositions are your go-to, kind of your core thoughts, your go-to emotions, or your worldviews. So in terms of core thoughts or core beliefs, I work with a chunk of people who really believe if I work hard enough, I can accomplish anything in life. That is their core belief, and it calls shotgun in their lives. I also work with people who believe that they have a core belief that is totally contrary. They say it doesn't matter how hard I work, I'm never going to be able to accomplish anything great. And that core thought calls shotgun in their life. Do you know any of your core beliefs about yourself, about life, about the way that all of this works? Do you know what your go-to emotions are? Right? There are some people that when life is just hitting them so hard, they shut down. They get overwhelmed with a sense of helplessness and hopelessness. They want to go to bed and like, wake me up when it's over. They can get into that state of depression. Sadness is sort of their go-to emotion. And there are other people that they avoid sadness at all costs. And so anger is their go-to emotion because it makes them feel strong and a bit more powerful. But maybe they're at risk of, hulking out on people from time to time. And are you aware of your own worldviews? So I remember being at a dinner party, and when you go to any social event and somebody introduces you as a therapist, 99% of the time at the end of the night, you're in a corner with somebody unpacking whatever it is that comes up. So this young man pulled me aside and he said, you have to talk to my mom. My mom lacks all empathy. I think she might be sociopathic. She's not compassionate. This woman will not let me have a bad day. So mom is there. She chimes in. She's like, what is he saying? And so the son takes over and says, I'm telling her, you don't let me have bad days. Some days I just want to sleep in. Some days I'm not in the mood to go to school. Just let me have a couple of days. This mother, I wish I could record her. She goes on to tell me that when she was 20 years old, she was fleeing a war-torn country where there was political and religious persecution. And that she and him, who was at the time, I believe, 9 months or something like that, fled and escaped. So she said, if your bad day doesn't include the robbery of your freedoms, if your bad day doesn't include you're being persecuted because of your religious or political beliefs, if your bad day isn't dodging bullets, it's not a bad day. I think I died laughing. And neither of their worldviews are wrong. But the mistake that we make is we assume that everybody's worldview is in alignment with our own, and that's not true. So it's worth it to take inventory and really identify what is my worldview and what has shaped that. Are you aware of your strengths and weaknesses? Again, do you just have a working knowledge of where you tend to excel, where you're not so good? Quick example, but I remember working with business partners, and it was a man and a woman. The woman was just a creative genius, so intelligent and very inspiring for their colleagues, and could really help shape their craft and whatnot. But when it came to giving feedback, she did not have a filter. So if somebody brought her work that she thought was garbage, she would literally tell them, your work is garbage and I don't know, why are you wasting my time? So ruthless. So that was her weakness, and that's where her business partner had to come in and be the one to do reviews. And I mean, heaven forbid somebody was fired. When she fired them, she was like, this, good riddance, bye, don't care to see you again. So again, she had to really identify, this is my weakness and this is my partner's strength, where he's able to extend a bit more of that grace and humanity to other people. Are you able to regulate your mood? So if you're in a bad mood, if you're feeling angry, do you know how to regulate that? Right? Do you know the benefit of going for a 20-minute walk before you respond to that email or pick up that phone, so that you're taking the edge off? When you're feeling anxious and riddled with fear, do you immediately go and project that out onto other people, or do you know how to catch your breath and ground yourself? If you're feeling sad, do you have the capacity to let yourself cry? Take a hot shower, make yourself a cup of tea, and maybe make plans the next day to connect with a friend. Do we know how to manage the uncomfortable emotions that we're going to go through over and over and over again? Are you comfortable with demonstrating empathy? Empathy doesn't mean that you have to be anybody's therapist. Empathy is just the practice of being able to sit with people's pain. And I think a mistake that we make is we think that people are just born empathetic, and that's actually not always the case. I mean, we're often born empathetic, but our socialization and our upbringing comes in. So I find that there's two groups of people who can really, really struggle with empathy. One is a group of people who are so highly sensitive, not weak, highly sensitive, highly attuned to the needs of other people, that when somebody is expressing their pain, they feel like they're drowning in it. They take it on as though it's their pain, and they have to find solutions. And if they don't find solutions, they're a bad person. They can really struggle with demonstrating empathy because they're just jumping to find solutions. There's another group of people that really struggle with demonstrating empathy because they never received it growing up. That empathy was not the name of the game in their household. They probably grew up where it was sort of suck it up, buttercup, rigidity, strictness, which is not inherently bad, but it's hard to give something that you don't know. It's like trying to speak a foreign language when all you know is English or whatever your mother tongue is. Are you clear and respectful in the way that you communicate your perspective? And really the more truthful question is do you know how to fight fair? Do you know how to disagree with somebody, disagree with their ideas, perspectives, opinions without dehumanizing them? Do you know how to, again, to disagree or even attack their opinion if you think it's inherently super flawed without attacking their humanity, right? Or does it get a little bit blurry? It gets a little bit messy in the heat of the moment, because that's one way to really light relationships on fire. And lastly, are you good at being present and really being able to listen to other people? Our attention, it feels like it's increasingly being hijacked with the emails and the text messages and the news notifications and this social media updates and the podcast. It's so noisy. Do you know how to sit down and really be present, sit back and just hear what the person in front of you is trying to say? Quote by Daniel Goleman, who's basically one of the founding fathers of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the foundation of leadership, interpersonal effectiveness, and personal well-being. Now, one could argue that Daniel is biased. I'm going to say that he's actually spot on. Emotional intelligence, it's almost like, I don't know if it's spandex but it allows people to live a life that's just a little bit more spacious, They have more room to breathe. They're more aware of what's theirs to own. They're more aware of what's not theirs to own. And so to not take it on. And it just helps people to breathe in leadership, in families, in friendships, relationships, at work. And Daniel has been named, I think, a number of times, one of Time's most influential leaders, working with a ton of different top 500 Fortune companies. He's got a really good reputation, and he's got the research and the data to back it. So on strengthening emotional intelligence, how do we do it? The first thing, I would argue, probably the biggest pillar of emotional intelligence in order for us to be good, in order to be successful in developing, again, those healthy, sustainable relationships, is developing that self-awareness. Again, what are those go-to thoughts? What are those go-to emotions? What are your worldviews? And sometimes it can be really helpful to seek feedback from other people by asking people, how do you experience me at work? Am I a joy to be around? Am I, maybe not a joy, but am I approachable? Or do I intimidate people? Am I agreeable? And when I'm not agreeable, is it for good cause? And here's the thing. You got to ask people that are willing to be honest with you, and then you can't get mad at their answer, okay? I shared this a while ago, but I remember one of the best pieces of feedback I actually got from my staff. And they said, Amy, when you come on our calls, you look like a monster. You're like, you just look like you're raging out. It's because you're passionate, but every once in a while, crack a joke or crack a smile because we're afraid of you. And I needed to know that. Another exercise that we often do that can be so helpful is actually doing a high and low chart. And so a high and low chart is where you map out the top, I would say, let's go for 7 to 10 highest highs in your life. Moments where you just felt so accomplished or proud or at ease. And what you're going to find is that there's little themes littered throughout. And a real indication of your highlights will indicate what light you up, right? And that's good to know for the self-care and the fueling piece that we'll talk about a little bit later. And on the flip side, you're going to map out your lows and see if there's any themes that emerge as a result of that. And I'll give you an example. A young gentleman was referred to me years ago because of anger management. He was working in a sales role, incredibly competitive. So basically, amongst his colleagues, they were all vying for clients, and it was fair game until pen met paper and they signed the deal. So very, very competitive. And when some of his coworkers and colleagues stole clients last minute, my client went berserk, lost it, name calling, barging into offices. So he got in trouble and he had to go for anger management. However, when we were marking out his lows, the most predominant theme that came through was that he had a horrible history of being betrayed. And it suddenly helped to make sense that when he was experiencing betrayal, even though it was professional, even though these are sort of the terms and conditions that he agreed to, he had such a disproportionate reaction. And so in our work together, he was really he described it that the dust settled in his mind, and it really became clear what was in the past versus what was in the present. And he had a decision to make, do I want to keep working a job where at times it's frustrating? And he said, yeah, because he actually kind of liked the competition and it was great pay. But he recognized in my personal life, if my professional life is going to be competitive and I'm going to experience that betrayal, in my personal life, friends, family, relationships, it's got to be safe. Again, sometimes just that self-awareness, it can be so life-changing. And sometimes people connect with a coach or a therapist, a mentor, to just better understand the context of their own lives and how it's contributing to their behaviors. Number 2, we want to, I'm including myself in this, but we want to manage our emotional reactions. Again, we want to know what our triggers are. I'm going to give you one more just quick example. But I was working with this woman, incredibly successful executive. She too got in trouble. She too had to go for anger management. But she came in because she would lose it on her staff when they interrupted her. And again, as we're getting to know her story, doing high and low charts, different things like that, I find out that when she was growing up, her dad, who was not an easy guy, putting it PG, would regularly interrupt her. And he would interrupt her to basically say, why are you talking? You're not smart. You have nothing of value to add. Shh. So that's what she grew up with. And even though as an adult, she'd accomplished so much success, anytime somebody interrupted her, she would lose it. And so again, we want to know our triggers. We want to know the things that happen in our life that tend to trip us up, where we are more prone to having those emotional outbursts. And then we want to be able to sweat out the stress. Give me one sec. I think that we sometimes make the mistake of thinking that our emotions are in our head or in our hearts, and I'm sure they're there, but they're also littered throughout your body. And one of the best ways, whether it's anger, whether it's anxiety, whether it's sadness, quite seriously, you could have any diagnosis. One of the top recommendations that you are going to be given is to work out. And it's not necessarily, going to the gym and grunting it out like it's nobody's business, but it's even just going for a 30, 40-minute walk. But moving your body, how you treat your body, is going to have a huge influence on your mental health. And we want to be proactive with fueling ourselves. Again, I think another common mistake that we make is we wait till we have time, and then we're going to do the stuff that we need to not feel so burnt out and exhausted and snippy. Kind of want to reverse that. Again, it doesn't have to take hours, but if it's something as simple as going for a morning walk or going for a walk over your lunch, or making sure that you just have time throughout the week where perhaps if you're more extroverted, that you've got good people to socialize with, or if you're introverted, you've got time to read a book and just be quiet. Don't wait. Be proactive in looking at your schedule and making sure, just as we book our meetings and we book our appointments and we book our, client updates, where's your time for you? Book yourself in. Practice active listening, which again is so tough when our attention is just being fought over by so many external things. Limit distractions. And this can be as simple as when you have dinner, especially if you're in the company of other people, there are no phones, there are no screens, there is no TV. No, we're sitting down for dinner. I would rather people sit in absolute silence eating dinner than have any screens on, especially if we have families. And practicing moments of silence, I know that can bother a lot of people, or stillness. So my husband and I were watching one of our favorite programs the other day, and we burst out laughing. So the gentleman that we were watching, he was discussing a new trend on TikTok, and because TikTok is where all the cool trends are coming from. And the trend was called silent walking. So younger people are discovering this thing where you go outside without these headphones, without these screens, and you just walk. And they were reporting back about how amazing it is and lovely it is. My husband and I were dying laughing on the sofa. They're just going for a walk. But it's such a testament of the time that we live in, where we've got our music, we've got our podcast, we've got, our emails, Twitter, whatever it may be. And so actually the idea of just going for an extended period of time and being still is in some ways novel. Remember before we were talking about the amygdala, right? The part that goes crisis, code red. And you kind of want to balance it with your executive functioning. So the reason, the rationale, the logic. Doing one thing at a time, and that requires a bit more focus in silence with stillness, is one of the best ways to strengthen your frontal lobe and your executive functioning skills. So I'll have clients that do woodworking on the weekends, where they go out back, and for an hour or two, it's just them doing their woodworking, gardening, reading, art, painting, baking, but just again, not where you're also checking your phone in between. Just time where you are disconnecting from the outside world to better connect with yourself. Expanding emotional capacity. So again, our ability to demonstrate empathy. It's not about you playing therapist. It's not about you having all of the answers, but it's about strengthening your ability to sit with other people's discomfort and to say, I'm so sorry that you're going through this. How can I be of help? How can I be of service? Can I make you a cup of tea? Do you want me to find a therapist for you? Whatever it may be. And I think a struggle is that sometimes people aren't sure. They're like, do I just listen to you go on and on? Or do I try to think of solutions? Like, where do you want me to be? Ask, just ask. To say, I recognize that you are going through so much. How can I be of service? Do you just need an ear to listen? Or do you want me to actually think about ways that we could tackle this challenge? And then lastly, respecting your own limits. Notice that the request is not that you have limitless emotional capacity, right? Because we're not, vessels of unlimited energy. In order to wholeheartedly say yes and show up honestly in relationships, it's going to mean that at times we say no. And I'll be very, very transparent. I do this all the time. There are days that are so intense and so tough on me. And I know that I've got, kids that I've got to be there for. And so I might have a girlfriend call or a family member call and say, Amy, I had a bad day at work, or I got into a fight with my partner. Do you have time to talk? And I'll say, I'm so sorry. I don't have capacity. Here's a little caveat, a little asterisk though. I'll say to them, so I'm so sorry. I don't have capacity today. Can I call you tomorrow morning? Or better yet, can we go grab a coffee this weekend? So again, I will say no, but I'll also do my best to make sure that I have something else scheduled with them. And then lastly, remain optimistic. So whether we're talking about that growth mindset, it's not about drinking the Kool-Aid. It's not busting out the pom-pom saying AI is going to be the greatest thing, but it's about choosing hope. And I know that might sound a little bit airy-fairy, but it's about, remembering what we know, that we're resilient and that we're adaptive, and that, again, we are in this together. We're in it together. And I think that, again, when we're going through those major changes, those major transitions, it's so easy to get dark. It's so easy to get cynical. And there's something to be said about the people who are beacons of light. Again, I'm not talking about drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm not talking about busting out the pom-poms, but the people that say, no, I'm going to be deliberate in staying growth oriented. I'm going to be deliberate in remaining optimistic. The people who are afraid typically find that very attractive, and not attractive, but they want to be in that company, right? We think about, even just on a regular, all the negative news that comes to us, for people to be those leaders, to be those emotional intelligence leaders, and to say, listen, I don't know what the future holds, but we're going to figure it out together. We need that. Each of us has a choice about whether we want to be that beacon of hope and optimism. So some reading recommendations, if this is a topic that you're interested in and you just like to further within yourself, certainly Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman is a fantastic place to start, really the foundation of emotional intelligence, why it's so beneficial. And then if you want to get more into the practical and more detailed application of how do you do emotional intelligence at home, at work, Emotional Intelligence Habits by Travis Bradberry is an excellent read. Probably my favorite. My favorite is Emotional Agility by Susan David. Also, I love audiobooks, and Susan David is South African, and so her accent is just like heaven to me. But the reason that I also love this book is it's a beautiful, it's a really powerful intersection of emotional intelligence and resilience, which are, again, two things that we want to see increase. So I hope that you guys have found this helpful. Are there any questions that anybody has?
Thanks, Amy. And always enjoyable to hear you speak. And the one thing that one comment I remember from the summer was, since COVID, everyone's resorted to Netflix and red wine. And that can't be any truer than in our house. And anyway, but thank you for sharing for the last 45 minutes. We really enjoyed it. On behalf of all of us at IDC Worldsource and the advisors, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Take such good care.
All right, Amy.
Bye.
All right, just thank you.